Yeah, I mean, we thought about doing that in malls and stuff, but you know how it is here also, unless it is a government
Yeah, statutory requirement.
requirement. Yeah, then people will be like, what the hell? What do you mean I can't enter unless I have a vaccination?
I think the
But I'm
challenge
told
also is
buildings
that
all over Europe.
the vaccination levels are a lot higher now. And so if they can afford to do that with our vaccination level, it may be a little bit of a challenge because you'll exclude a lot more people.
True.
Well, you get tested, right? I mean, if you need to fly anyways, you have a test done.
Of course.
If you need to travel, if you go to work, you want to have a safe workplace. For example, we vaccinated all of our employees and their families. I'm sure a lot of you all have done the same with your in your companies as well. I think that's the way forward. And I think by the next, by end of October, the vaccination numbers for India should dramatically increase, because 3 months from May is when the bulk of our population started getting vaccinated. That's the below 45. So I think it would be wise to say by October we should be at a good number.
Sure, absolutely.
Guys, I'm going to interrupt. I think what seems to be a very interesting conversation for sure. But I think we also have now Abhishek. I think we've got all the panels. Abhishek, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. I'm extremely sorry. Finally.
Not a problem. I had to recharge.
Hi, Abhishek.
Hi. All right. I think we have everybody. I think we've done Najib. You guys have done the sound check and the video check. Are we good to go?
Sadhya, you can welcome Mr. Abhishek.
Yeah, Sadhya.
Yes. So I'll just give you a little countdown. I'll give you 5-second countdown, and then I'll start the webinar, and the attendees can start joining in. Okay. So please, the minute I start the webinar, just count, have a mental count in your head for 3, like 1, 2, 3, so that the attendees can, take the time to join in. Because of course, it'll be like loading for them. So at the count of 5, I'll start the webinar. And after that, have a mental count of 3 seconds. So I'm going to start the countdown.
Apul, you can take 5 to 10 seconds. Just let's allow some time for the audience to join.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I would do that any which ways.
So
let's start.
10 seconds for them to offer up.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, like mental count, so that our voice is not disturbing your voice.
Sounds good.
Great. At the count of 5, I'm going to start the webinar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Welcome everyone. I'm Apul Nahata from Brigade REAP. We are Asia's first PropTech accelerator, and we've had the privilege of working closely with over 50 plus startups catalyzing the PropTech ecosystem. I remember when we were putting the plan together for REAP, specifically the mission, we finalized it as helping inventors and innovators build sustainable and scalable businesses from India. Now, 5 years later, the mission really hasn't changed since we coined it. What has changed are how we think about sustainability and scalability of survival and growth of revenue and investments as we continue to work with exciting startups. Welcome to what should be an exciting session today. We have an excellent panel lined up today who very well understand what it takes to sustain and grow, who have not only been able to invest in real estate, but also in PropTech, have taken the early bets by not just working with startups, but also investing in them. They understand both sides of the coin. So without any further delay, I know we're running a couple of minutes late. Let me introduce them. Now, first let me start with Apurv. So Apurv Salarpuria is a chartered accountant by qualification, and he joined Salarpuria Sattva Group as the executive director. Salarpuria Sattva Group is one of the largest real estate companies, has operations across Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune, Coimbatore, Vizag, Kolkata, and Durgapur. The group has completed over 100 projects in India with over 20 million square feet of area. He is also he's also served as the president of Entrepreneurs Organization. And he's been a keen investor in startups, has made close to about 50 plus investments, if I remember right, Apurv, in startups like Mast Kalandar, in Bira Beer, in Epigamia, Paperboat, and more recently also in a few PropTech startups. He's the co-founder and past president of Calcutta Angel Network as well. Glad to have you with us, Apurv. Looking forward to an exciting conversation.
Good afternoon, Apurv. Looking forward.
Next, we have Abhishek Bhatevra. He is the director at Rohan Group. currently heading the group's real estate division. Rohan Group is involved in residential, industrial, and commercial construction and development, along with infrastructure development, warehousing, logistics, with landmarks sprawling over about 20 million square feet across the country. Abhishek also leads Rohan Group's investment in startups. Now, these span across sectors, including clean tech, prop tech, education, healthcare, and fintech. He's himself in board of some of the startups and works closely with them. Apart from that, he's actively involved in several CREDAI youth wing activities and CREDAI activities. So again, absolutely glad to have you, Abhishek, join us as well for this session.
Looking forward.
Third, we have Joydeep. Joydeep Ponugute is a second-generation entrepreneur who's a director at Manbham Constructions from Hyderabad. He spearheads marketing, business development, and construction-related activities for the company. He's got a very keen and interest and passion for design. He actively seeks out solutions that contribute to bringing about change in the construction space. He's a firm believer that the construction industry has significantly evolved, and the future of the industry, which is what I really like about him, is the future of the industry will be driven through technological means. Again, I think he believes that construction industry, which according to him still works in a lot of traditional way, provides a big opportunity for emergence of startups, who can provide great solutions. Glad to have you join us as well, Joydeep from Hyderabad.
Thanks, Apple.
So last but not the, we have Zayed after that. So Zayed is a second generation of Razaks at the Prestige Group. And he sort of has been initiated in the business as a mentee to the chairman and managing director, Mr. Irfan Razak. So while assisting the chairman, he's also responsible for sales and marketing of commercial office space. Zayed is spearheading a very important urban transformation project, which is aimed at improving public spaces. Prior to joining Prestige Group, Zayed was in Singapore at CapitaLand, and Zayed continues to evaluate startups, which is where I have sort of met up with him a few times for the group from business and investment perspective. So Zayed, thanks again for joining.
Pleasure, Apur.
Finally, last but not the least, we have Pavitra Shankar. So Pavitra is an executive director at Brigade Enterprises. She's got several years of experience in consulting, in private equity, in real estate development, and so on. At Brigade, she's responsible for the strategy and growth of Brigade's residential business with a strong focus on sales, marketing, finance, and customer experience. She also drives technology initiatives and digital transformation within the company. And in her role, she gets ample opportunities to not only evaluate startups who are seeking business from Brigade, but also looking at promising startups where investments should be made or could be made. So thanks again, Pavitra, for joining us.
Thanks, Apul, and nice to be here with all of the other panelists as well. Looking forward.
Great. So let me now, I think let me start with the questions and let's get the discussion going, right? So I know each of you have been using startups in your business to deliver value, right? That's a given. I think that's why we are all here. Now, before we get into the finer aspects of investment, let me understand, how do you evaluate a startup before you give it business? So let me start with the lady first. Pavitra, do you want to share your thoughts on that? And then we move on to others.
I hope you don't start with the lady for all the questions.
Right.
Yeah, I think the way we've seen it is a startup providing a solution that is going to resolve a pain point for us. And we are looking at it very keenly from a developer perspective. So when I evaluate, it's mostly, okay, how am I going to use this startup? Within the entire process of conceptualizing what is the land that we're going to go ahead and, what is the project that we're going to go ahead and build on a particular land parcel, to, how we execute the project, how do we identify the customer, what is the customer experience? That's a huge part of it, because the customer experience basically spans 4 years or so. So which piece of that customer experience can they potentially, impact? And, while customer experience is a big thing, the other side of the coin is, does it make me more efficient? Is it going to somehow reduce my cost, or is it just going to somehow streamline some of our processes and in-house way of dealing with things. So that's how we look at it. And I think it's important for, multiple stakeholders in the company to sort of come together and actually give what their opinions might be. And it's interesting, nowadays you get startups across the board. It's not just only in construction or like, virtual 3D kind of visualization. We are seeing startups in the legal side of business, home loans. So it's really interesting. It's all aspects of kind of how does one take a land, entitle it, develop it, and sell to the customer.
So look at the entire life cycle, see how efficiencies and costs would be. Apoorv, what do you think? Anything? What are your thoughts?
I'll just give a little perspective before I answer the question directly. My own kind of belief is that, the real estate business that, that all of us are a part of is one of the businesses which is kind of slightly late to adopt technology historically, at least in our part of the world. So my own belief is that we want to work with more and more startups because this is an industry which is ripe for disruption in various places. Pavitra spoke about some aspects of it. So the general mindset, at least for me, is to try and work with more startups so that we can catch, opportunities to be early disruptors in all of these spaces. And with that mindset, the other thing which we evaluate is the risk in, when I'm getting a startup on board, what am I risking? Is it something which I can control and I can check at an early point, or am I changing an ERP system, or am I changing a sales system which is going to have a higher risk opportunity? So if it's something which is not very risky for us to, or where we have an early exit, I would prefer to work, go ahead and start working and then kind of see how it goes. So to kind of give a slightly abstract answer, the idea is to try and work with more startups than not. Again, controlling the risk that you're putting the business in, whether it's customers, whether it's vendors, spoiling their experience or not. Yeah.
Very interesting perspective. Abhishek, what do you got to add to that?
I think similar thoughts, like typically in real estate, we evaluate the opportunity in a similar way that we would evaluate any other startup opportunity. So which is basically to understand what the problem statement that the startup is trying to solve. Is that a big enough problem that is a pain point, or is it an incremental solution? If it's an incremental solution, fine. I mean, it's okay. As a business, even if some improvement in efficiencies are there, we would still like to evaluate those startups. But then the amount that we would like to put in that startup, or the way we would back that startup, will be a little different than if someone is trying to make like a big change, Delta 4, what Kunal calls it. So if that's the problem statement, and from a solution perspective, whether the solution that they are getting is going to solve that problem. A lot of times the startups identify the problem statement properly, but some of the solution is not answering that problem in a complete way. And so that's what we try to evaluate. From a real estate perspective, similar to what Pavitra and Apoorv said, looking at how they improve our businesses, the risks in that, whether it is going to change my existing process, because it's a startup, there are risks in that, whether that startup will be available after 5 years, and hence I can take it to my customers, because if there's something which I want to give to my customers, which is going to last for 3-5 years, I need to ensure that that startup is going to be alive by that time.
Very important, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, some of these things is what we would also look at when we're looking at specific real estate startups.
So comprehensiveness, assessment of risk, would they be still alive by the time the project's delivered, so on and so forth. Zayed, what about you at Prestige? How do you sort of look at them?
I think there are a lot of common aspects in how we look at it with the rest of the panelists. Obviously, everybody looks at the solution. But more than the solution, of course, when you look at the solution, you have, can it improve efficiency, time to market? Can it complement my current customer offering? Can it reduce my externalities of development, because we're bringing so much into the built environment, improve the ecology, things like that. Apart from that, what we look at as a developer, if we are partnering or investing with the startup, is how can is there any synergy between us and them? And obviously, if you're investing in a startup at the early stage, you're looking at, can I make that idea scalable using my scale? So scalability is a huge factor for us. because that's how you really add value, to that company, and then really make the most of that investment proposition. So that's how we look at it. Apart from how do I minimize risk, or how can that idea be disruptive? And most of these startup ideas are disruptive. For example, we did invest in one startup that the Brigade Reap did kind of have, which was WeGot, smart meters. So yeah, they were disruptive because right now there is no statutory requirement saying that you need to have a water meter. Okay. But what is happening currently is all the water being supplied to, for example, an apartment complex would be the water charge would be equally paid by all the residents. So you're not paying for your own consumption, you're paying for everybody's consumption. So what would happen is eventually you would stop kind of paying for somebody else and pay for only your that they're subsidizing the neighbor's water or leakage and things like that. And it hasn't been done as yet, to my knowledge, in our country in a big way. So if you look at it, once the statutory norms come in saying that you have to kind of have a water meter for every apartment, you have this startup who's there in that pioneering position to kind of scale up and ramp up ASAP. So these are the few things that we look at, and it's very interesting because not all of the startup ideas can be successful or scalable. So scalability is something that we put a lot of our focus on.
Good, thanks. So just taking that thread to Joydeep. Joydeep, you were among the early investors in WeGot, the company that Zayed was referring to. So what about you? I mean, how do you evaluate them before giving business? And then what I'd also like to hear from the panelists after this is, what are some of the areas that you are currently looking to work with startups from a business point of view, not investment quite yet, but from a business point of view? Joydeep?
So, Apul, when we give startups some business, right? Firstly, what we evaluate is which function of our business is it trying to solve a problem in. And firstly, do I need a problem to be solved in that function of my business? Is it large enough? Then, of course, there's cost versus value. Cost need not be just what you pay the startup. Cost is also what you internally spend in training people. And after doing all of that, spending that much time, are you getting value out of it, right? The other thing is, what is the depth of research that the people have done behind that startup in problem solving? So sometimes it's very superficial. Sometimes they go to the, right to the bottom of the problem and solve it. And of course, at the end of the day, you have to, take that risk and take that small leap of faith, because they're a new company and they're offering a new solution. Sometimes what happens is when you do that, it might give you an edge in how you run that functional business. And especially if it's a customer facing role, then you might deliver better service and all of that. But these are the factors that we typically consider, apart from what all the other panelists have mentioned.
Okay. Any specific...
I think apart from this, there's one thing that I think everybody took for granted is the promoter. We want to know who has the idea and whether he can run with it, and whether he actually has that vision to take his idea to the next level with all the support and all the resources and all the capital. So can you trust them with that is one of the key things that we look at.
Very interesting. So apart from the risk itself, which Abhishek was sort of alluding to, what you're saying is even from a business point of view, you want to also look at the promoters and the team to see if they are able to actually execute what they've come to, the solution that they've come to you with. Very interesting. Any specific areas or maybe any startup that you're actively working with, any specific areas from a business point of view that you're working with? Just want to sort of get some of those discussion out before we move on to the investment specific discussion.
Yeah, maybe
Abhishek. Yeah, go ahead.
So I think there have been some of the areas where we have seen some good startups coming up. One is in, I think, fintech space with PropTech. That's where we've seen some movement. I've seen companies like there's a Home Capital that's like a prime example of a great story. They basically fund the down payment for the customer at an interest-free, they give an interest-free loan for the down payment. And that solves a very big pain problem in the industry. Similar to that, there are others, like Basic is another company that we were evaluating, who is into affordable home loans. They're right now playing an aggregator role, but eventually they are looking to. So again, the fintech space is something where I think there will be a lot of kind of good companies that might come up. The other area which I think there should be some major innovation is on the construction management space itself. All the allied, real estate is basically finally a construction business, a core engineering business. That's where, although it's a brick and mortar business where not much innovation might happen in the core construction, although there are various technologies and all to do fast construction and stuff, but we are looking at startups. Startups can actually aid in managing that entire construction in a much more efficient way, because now there is so much of data. When I look at my ERP data, I collect huge amounts of data at my own, at every activity level, right? And there are companies now coming and telling, okay, this is where you can make the process more efficient. This is where the leakages might be. This is how you can kind of, maybe do your evaluation in a much better way. So at the core construction management level, I think there are startups working on it. And because you asked the question, that is where if someone comes with really innovative, disruptive, people will lap it up, because that's one area where not much innovation is happening. Again, marketing, sales, AR, VR, making inventory management. And so basic such hygiene things a lot of people are anyway doing. And I think these would be some of those
of the areas that
where startups could play a role.
Okay. Any others or anything else that others? Apul?
Yeah, apart from, I think for us, and I think probably for the industry in general, the sales and marketing / CRM function was probably the first or the early adopter of startups and technology, because it was a customer facing piece, and results were showing faster. I think, like Abhishek said, of course, the project lifecycle management piece in terms of software, etc., is a big piece, which is something which both from an investment as well as a use case perspective we are working with. There are from an end use perspective, student housing, co-living. I think we both as an investment as well as strategically working with some of these companies, is an opportunity that we've been kind of seeing. And also, as an example, there was an investee company of ours called Design Cafe, which is kind of in the same space as a live space, etc. So we worked with companies like that as well to kind of do our model flats, etc., give options to end users, to kind of plan their interiors off the bat, kind of working with them to kind of develop options. So I think of course, MyGate, of course, was, I think we were one of the first few people to start using them. In fact, the founder stays in one of our apartments in Bangalore. So community management, and so I think the areas of use are only growing.
Fairly widespread. I mean, what seems like, and I'm sure I think it covers quite a bit of gamut, because some of the areas that two of you mentioned, sales, marketing, CRM, construction management. We're running the 10th cohort now at REAP, and I can tell you every cohort and cohort after cohort, we have startups who are applying who are in these areas. So it sort of matches with what we are seeing as well, because we get quite a few applications, and there are quite a few startups which are still trying to solve this problem. So it's very interesting to see that, on the other side, developers, investors are looking for it, and there are startups working in this. Very, very interesting. What made you guys specifically invest in startups? Work with them, of course, and also invest, because a lot of times when I've been interacting with developers, the idea is, there is still a bit of resistance. Now, you guys are the change makers. You guys have gone out, have not only given them business, but what ticks for the startups? What made you guys invest? Who wants to take it? I'd love to Pavitra, maybe you want to start and then?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we did invest in 4 of these startups. And I think first of all, we had to see a use case as a developer. I mean, that is just our approach, because we felt that if we could see the use case, then certainly many other developers would see the use case as well, which I'm really happy to say, the real estate community and the fraternity has really sort of, come together to give all of these, if we're talking about REAP companies or startups, they've all, come forward and given them projects and so on. And it's good to see that, because it's not just how does that startup work in one company? How is it really going to be able to give that solution and modify that solution to different developers and different kind of geographies or types of product, whatever it may be. So we felt that is number one, really important. And the other thing is the general market scenario. Is it going to help them scale up? Are there going to be enough opportunities for them to scale up that particular solution that they're doing, whether it's here or whether it's in the US or somewhere else? It doesn't really matter. Is there an opportunity for that? And finally, I think Zaid's comment that how is the promoter? Like, are they actually, built from the right sort of material to really be able to take on those challenges and scale? Because we are all of a certain scale now, and we know that's kind of what is the real nature of the game. Ideas are great. How you're going to execute and how you're going to keep your level of quality and service the same once you see the benefits of having so many investors and enough opportunities to work on. So those are the 3 things that we kind of look at when we evaluate whether it's worth investing in the startup.
Okay. Abhishek, I know you've invested in 26 startups now at Rohan? Quite a few, right? And anything else to add or your thoughts on that?
Why do we invest in these startups? One is because I come from a finance background, and in real estate you can't do much finance, so this is how I keep myself motivated. And I love working. Even in my earlier after, I used to work with a lot of startups here. But what I realized when I started working in our real estate business was that at that time, a lot of these young guys were actually coming, interesting products, interesting things that they were doing. This was about 4 or 5 years ago. And some of them much smarter than I am. And I thought if I just, I'm able to, join hands with them and see how they can improve my business processes or whatever. And I can get them the strategy, the network, or whatever other finance that I can get. So if there is a lot of synergies in this, right? And hence I thought if we can work with these guys closely, I myself will benefit personally, of course, as well as in my own company, because all the startups, and at least the PropTech case that we have done, all of them we use in our own businesses. We've also invested in companies which are non-PropTech, right? And again, the reason is similar. There are so many sectors which 10, 15 years down the line are going to be the bigger sectors and going to be contributing to the economy in a much bigger way than what they are contributing right now. I think I need to have a foot in the door. I need to understand what these are doing. Maybe some of it will be related to my business, but some of it maybe just make me a better entrepreneur. So if I work with them, just understand what are the new age ventures coming up, it will help me in both business and personal work.
Okay. So it's more from within that you're saying this is a sector that we should look at. Apurv, anything to add there?
So again, a lot of things with which Abhishek said also resonate with me, but I'll just kind of again give a little more perspective from my side. So I actually started investing in startups in general much before PropTech startups. I was kind of, while I was still in Bangalore, maybe about 2006-07 is when I, early days of the kind of angel investment industry or VC industry in our country. That's when I kind of by luck got inducted into this ecosystem, so to say. And, I found it extremely enriching just to meet a bunch of energized, like Abhishek said, people who were much smarter than me, kind of taking up, new businesses, newer way of businesses. Back then our business was a lot more traditional, a lot more legacy oriented. And, I found this extremely liberating to kind of see these new age business practices, to kind of see bold business moves, which were kind of not the norm in our industry in terms of way of functioning. And prop tech startups back then were honestly not really a category in India, so to say. There could have been a few in isolation, but as a category,
it
didn't exist.
Right.
So as kind of in the last few years, we saw more and more startups trying to coming up in our industry. It seemed like a natural extension to kind of evaluate them both from a user perspective as well as an investor perspective, because you understood the space a little better. One felt one could add value, could use the organization to add value both ways. Extract value from the startup as well as add value to them. So the prop tech piece, in fact, for me was a second stage or a logical extension of the startup investing piece overall.
Interesting. Okay, Zayed, a question for you. How do you identify trends for investing in PropTech? I know, at Prestige, you guys are looking at engaging more with startups. We've had conversations earlier as well about, about REAP startups and others. But how do you sort of identify trends? How much of a local versus a global play do you assess when investing?
No, I think with investing, in general, you have to be out there. You need to be connected with what's going on. I think reading is something very important. So exactly what's going on, what trends could play out. For example, now you have the whole health trend going on. So automatically you start channeling your mind to start looking at how can I connect health with something organic that I'm doing. Right, connected with our business, connected with our ecosystem. So it's just about knowing how to source, and really stimulating your mind in different ways and being aware of what's happening, and then start sourcing out what people are doing, and like, for example, different accelerators and things like that. And then eventually, when it boils down to, okay, fine, do we now adopt a certain idea in our business, or do we invest? Then there's a different kind of framework that you look at for whether you take that plunge or not. But apart from that, it's just about being really aware, being connected with what's going on in the market, and then keeping that engagement and conversation going on to find out who's there and what's happening.
Okay, but there is no preset saying these are the 2 or 3 areas, because what you said, what was very interesting is
about sustainability. I think sustainability.
Yes, wellness, sustainability, because the fabric of PropTech itself is sort of now widening.
Absolutely, we had this conversation earlier,
yeah.
And we are always looking to see how we can, as a group, reduce our externalities. How can we embrace more technology which can make us more sustainable? All the way till the customer level. So we're always looking at startups who are able to do this for us or provide a solution. So we're looking at that. We're looking at the solution, and then we're moving towards that approach. So it's pretty interesting what's in the market right now, and it's about having the idea but not having the bandwidth.
Okay, that's a good problem for startups.
There. So we may have a bunch of ideas. We know what works, what doesn't work for us. But probably our teams, our different divisions aren't able to kind of deliver on that. So then that's when you reach the market, and then you have somebody with a half-baked idea. You have that resource and say, okay, fine, now we'll support you. We'll adopt your idea. You develop it further for us, and you provide a solution which is proprietary to us. And then it reaches a fully developed concept, and then they can approve to market, and then they can take it to the market and sell it as something else. So that's one approach that we like to take as well. And hopefully there'll be some success coming out of that. But for sure, as a developer, as a business entity, we stand to reap a lot of benefit from this approach.
Okay. Very quickly, I just want to plug in. For those of who have joined us, if you have got questions, what I request you just type them out in the chat window, and I will bring that to the right participants and get them to share their thoughts on it. With that, Joydeep, we were talking about this earlier. you've been looking at PropTech startups for some time now, and you've been looking at using them as well. Do you invest first and then work with startups? Or do you first use them and then sort of invest in them? Zayed gave us one sort of idea wherein they're saying they're also looking at bringing in startups specific to solve their problem. But what about you? How do you sort of evaluate?
Not necessarily, Apul. I think both are independent of each other. There might be some company which comes up with a great idea, and it might not be applicable for your scale of business and for your company, but it could be applicable for some other company. Which, for example, he might come up with a product which caters to the commercial segment, and I might be only a residential developer. Doesn't mean that I need not consider them for an investment, because they are solving some problem in another segment of the industry. And, there are certain startups like, we work with them, and if we think it's good, it's something that it can be implemented on, and it can be scaled up, then we'd love to be a part of their journey. And,
okay, interesting. What are your key expectations from a startup when it approaches to you from an investment point of view? Now, what we've heard, and I think you couple of you were talking about this, there are several risks, right? The team could be young, the idea is fairly new, they've not demonstrated scale, it's non-revenue generating, and so on and so forth, right? But what are your key expectations? What should a startup have before they approach people of your stature for investments as also business?
See, with respect to investments, when we meet, at least when I meet the founder, it's the first thing that I evaluate, at least, is the attitude of the founder. So how is he? How does he come across? How is he putting across his particular company to us? The depth of the research that he's done for the problem. Then how he treats his internal stakeholders, and if he's already had clients, then what's the life cycle of that client? How has he been able to retain that client over multiple projects? So these are some of the things that I evaluate. See, this is all apart from your general DD and the process that goes on. See, also it is about how passionate the particular founder is about his the product that he is building. I can tell you from an example, we've been trying to, from our projects that we've just started, we only want to build green buildings. So one of the rule that we have in the company now that we've just started implementing is we are distributing water meters to all my employees, and I'm sending the team to install them, because I need them to start thinking how I think and what I want to deliver to my customers. So unless they are not on the same page, they won't speak the same language. So, what are the small little things that they have done so that the whole company thinks just like the founder? Those are the kind of things that we evaluate while investing.
Okay. What about you, Abhishek? What are your key expectations?
So one is that Brigade REAP would have vetted them.
Thanks.
That gives a lot of confidence, and there are a couple of companies which I've told.
I know.
Joy, if you can just if you can just look at them, I'll be very happy to invest in them. But yeah, so we have a bit of a thesis for investment, not just the real estate. So there are some factors which are completely yes, no, and then there are some factors which we give weighting to.
Okay.
So it has to be, we don't invest in R&D. We want someone who has already done some pilots and has a paying customer. So that's like a yes, no. We like obviously multiple founders, one standard thing, one single co-founder, little risky.
Right.
Then again, as I'm mentioning, the problem identification and all. I think one of the key things, if you're only putting your financial hat on and not your real estate business hat on, is how do you make money in this startup? Obviously, the scalability, what Zed was mentioning, very important. The entry barriers, is there something which will stop others from just copying or coming in and just it will be a price war? If it's only a price war, not very interesting. a very important thing that we look at, which if it is there, we love, is if the startup is coming with a micro VC or some VC as a co-investor with it. The reason we like doing this is because a lot of times as an angel investor, the money that you make is only if you get an exit. You're not looking at IPO is too far away, and dividends is not something that you're going to expect from these startups.
Correct.
So the way you make money as an angel investor, if the startup is able to raise the next rounds of funding, maybe at least 2 more rounds of funding, right? And that becomes much easier when you already have some VC with you on your cap table, because the VC will give you all those connections, will be able to, they have deep pockets, they may be able to invest much bigger in the next round, and hence hopefully then get you a secondary exit. If that happens, that is very good. Again, if it's a serial entrepreneur, if someone has already done one startup, has exited, that gives more comfort that the startup, the founder knows the entire game of startups. It's not an SME, finally, it's a startup. So he's seen the entire life cycle of how to build the business, exit the business. So I think these are some of the things that we evaluate when we are looking from a startup investment point of view.
Okay. So I think one point, which is, having a micro VC, basically hedging your bets in terms of there's somebody already committing with them. But what I also want to touch, and maybe Apurv, you could sort of, share some thoughts on that is, let's say for the first check, right? Because I think I'll take what Abhishek said and Joydeep said, which is, some traction, not really just pure R&D, some semblance of a revenue, solving a real problem. What more? What is that? See, there are startups that you've rejected for investment and startups which have made it. And at times, when I talk to some people, they say, yeah, there was something about it which sort of worked apart from the 5 or 7 core things which is yes and no and some weighted calculation that you make. How about you? How do you sort of, what are your expectations when you look at it?
In terms of startups in general, there are only 3 sectors that I invest in, which is consumer/retail, hospitality, and real estate or prop tech in whatever way. Because my own belief is that I don't even understand my own business. So to try and understand every kind of business is not going to be possible. I want to kind of create as narrow a focus as I can. I typically engage at a fairly early stage. For example, my investment in Bira was when they didn't have a beer. They were distributors for craft beers across the world at that point. Which means that, there is limited formal data that you can analyze or comparison you can make. So for me, over the years, I've realized that there are 2 areas which I largely kind of try to understand. And, a lot of it is soft stuff. It's not necessarily, I don't really have a written down framework, but the 2 areas that I kind of evaluate or try to evaluate very keenly is the size and nature of the problem that is being solved. So whether it's complex enough, whether it's large enough. So scalability, what value you're bringing to the consumer, etc. The size of the market, all that comes in that bucket. And the second or the most important piece for me, I think as Zahid also had mentioned earlier, is the promoter. Because at an early stage, the business as you go along is like, you could possibly pivot many times, because there are the learning curve is extremely steep. So you want somebody who has the right attitude and who's looking, who's open to kind of challenging their own ideas. And there are tons of examples, but I can a quick one I can cite in a non-prop tech is Epigamia, which is a Greek yogurt and dairy company, which some of you might have used. Actually, when I invested in was an ice cream company. So the business which I'm an investor in today didn't exist when I invested, but the promoter is what the key difference was. They for various reasons they pivoted and now they've got a broad, portfolio of dairy value-added dairy products. So for me, pretty much the evaluation is on these 2 aspects, but a lot of it is fairly soft aspects. It's not like and the more on the promoter side, because there is very little data, etc. you can analyze. If you can't trust the promoter for any reason, if there is a discrepancy between, two when I've spoken to him 2 times and there's a discrepancy in terms of data or in terms of, things which he is representing, that is an absolute no-no. Because if I can't trust the promoter at an early stage. If I'm not comfortable, doesn't matter how good the business or how promising the idea is, the line is drawn there.
Very interesting. Pavitra, what about you? More to add there? I'm assuming you also like Brigade REAP startups to begin with, but apart from that.
Yeah, a lot of Brigade REAP startups, non-REAP startups also. I don't think I can add any more to what all these guys have said, because I'm much newer to the whole investing side rather than the developer use case part of it. And I've been told this answer is very non-Indian kind of answer, but maybe it's from my private equity days, is know your exit. Like there's only so much you can know about this founder or their business case or the environment or whatever until you go ahead and invest, and post that you're in that investment. So how are you going to protect yourself from that should anything, go in a different way than you planned it? Because all of these things, like we would love to have founders who can pivot, who are self-aware, who will actually are coachable. Like these are some of the things that we even look at from the REAP standpoint itself. Are they willing to take this kind of feedback? And are they willing to sort of, swallow ego sometimes if it's required? So sometimes you don't know those things until you're already after you've already invested in them. So the only additional point I can sort of add to what everyone else has said is that be, protective of kind of your own investment and your exposure to that, however it may be.
Interesting. Zaya, the question for you, one of the key things that we keep hearing, from startups, something that I remember even early days of REAP, in the first cohort was, hey, if you're working for Brigade, you know what, the other developer may not give us business. Right? Or if we are a Brigade REAP startup, we won't. And this we have seen quite often, right? If a developer A invests, then developer B may not be very interested in working with us. Now, given that you wear both hats, what are your thoughts on it?
What's very interesting? There's a lot of consolidation happening. For example, we're doing a project with Brigade in Chennai. Okay, you've done a project with RMZ somewhere. We've bought land from somewhere else. Okay, so if you look at the size and scale of startup compared to the risk that we're taking on a real estate assets is very different.
Asset, yeah.
All I have to say is just ensure that if you're buying some land in a rural part, make sure it's on the main road. Okay, so at least that main road facing part will appreciate and you average out your return. So that's what investing in a startup is. It's like buying land, for 5-6 crores an acre. That's your ticket size of investment. Okay, you buy 20 acres somewhere, make sure it's on the main road. No, some part of it at least. So you make that multiple over a period of time.
Very interesting way to bring it. But have any of you sort of experienced this? Because this used to be something that we would hear from startups early on.
Can I chime in there?
Sorry?
Can I just chime in there?
Please do.
I was talking to Nirupa about this and I was asking her, did we face a lot of these issues? And she said, yeah, maybe in the first cohort.
Yes.
Because everyone's like, what's going on? Why is Brigade doing this startup thing or what's going on? But I think, and I will say like to, big props to all the developers who are part of Credai. All of you are here anyway. Abhishek is one of those who've used so many Brigade startups, and point in case, he only said that he'd like to have REAP sort of vet the company before they use it. I think it's kind of happened over the course of, like you said, we're at our 10th cohort. So I think people have also seen that REAP is also just doing this more for the industry at large and sort of like a thought leadership or, how do we bring technology into the sector that just doesn't use that much technology at all and really does need to use it, because we're all working on not very great margins. We're all trying to scale up. You can't scale up with people like in a linear or exponential way. So how are you going to use technology to do that? So I think I think I've made my pitch on that, but there's people like Abhishek here who've used so many of the companies and like to have REAP vet them. So I think that outweighs the risk of maybe, oh, you already work for somebody else.
No, and Apul, I'm going to add something to what Apurv had mentioned, saying that we come from an industry which is like most of these businesses are legacy businesses. They're used to doing things in a certain way.
Right.
When you know that your contemporaries in the industry have adopted this idea, it kind of pushes the teams to say, okay, fine, let's take another look at this idea, because Shobha is doing it, Brigade is doing it, whoever's doing it. So it's part of the ecosystem, and it makes sense. Nobody sees it as they're doing it. It's not an ego game over here. It's about what's the use case, and is that product something that can be adopted? Can we trust those teams? Are they professional enough to execute for us?
Nice.
Because in our industry with the scale right now, we can't take a risk on a vendor which will kind of give up halfway or can't service the customer after a period of time, and who are just playing the startup game, saying that I want to get the top 4 or 5 builders on my profile, saying that I've done this, then go to the market and raise more money, saying that, listen, my use case has been kind of demonstrated over here, so now I can scale a lot more, and then things don't happen in the right way. So again, what Pavitra said is, I think Abhishek said, who else is on the cap table? Is there some institutional money over there? So there's a little bit more governance involved. That's very important. So at least then the promoters, we can trust them, saying that, okay, fine, they'll professionally manage and then take it to the next level. So all of it's a bunch of things that come in. It's not just one clear short formula. And most of these startup guys are not from business. They're probably some professionals who are very good at doing something, and they found a solution. So together, working with an accelerator or VCs or whoever, they get that mentorship on what it is to run a business is what we're looking at, and that idea can take off, because the VCs and accelerators can't handhold them throughout the process.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Which brings me to the next question, and I'm sure I'm going to get some slack on it. But hey, let's go for it. We've heard, from some venture investors, who, they've not really invested much in prop tech, right? Mostly due to the fact that for most prop tech startups, the customer is a real estate developer. And I'm going to say this, and I know I'm going to get slack for it, but the perceived notion is real estate developers are not the best paymasters. Now, I think it's a fairly broad stroke of brush, from my point of view, but I've got the best of the guys here. So now let's hear from you. What do you guys have to say? And I think I've seen that because of that, quite a few of you also invested in startups to show that, we are not just giving them business, but we believe in it. I can see some of you having, sort of a sly smile. So what do you have to say to that?
Well, Apurv, if I can go first.
Yes, Jordi.
The real estate industry as such, we all agree, is a very large industry. And I think we all agree that there are a lot of industries that are dependent on us. So if we were such bad paymasters, I'm pretty sure all of them would have been out of business by now. See, granted, sometimes we do make late payments. I guess that's prevalent across all industries.
True.
See, there is also a slightly different structure in terms of cash flow with respect to real estate. It might be a wider discussion, but essentially what happens is we make all the investment upfront, right? We buy land, we get permissions, then we build, and as we start building, we only take collections after we hit a certain milestone. So the cash flow might sometimes be a little difficult here and there, but it's not like we're bad paymaster as such. And the fact that so many people have been dependent on us in terms of so many other industries, I think that proves the case that we might be a little late sometimes, but it's not right to paint the brush that way.
Fair enough. Others, what I mean, this is again basis our conversations with some few investors who sort of made that comment, and we had similar thoughts. But what do you think?
If I can add to what Joydeep just said, I think our industry has had has kind of suffered a bad name on various counts over the last many years.
Mm-hmm.
And in the last few years now, we've seen consolidation happen. It's become now a regulated industry with RERA, etc. coming in. And I'm obviously talking, in a kind of broader sense here. I think with a large part of the consolidation behind us and maybe a little bit ahead of us, largely the people who are left standing in the room are now quality developers. A lot of the fly-by-night operators who are here to make a quick buck have gotten weeded out for various reasons. The industry has been in a down cycle, which meant that anybody who couldn't survive that is out. And we've become a fairly regulated industry in some cases, slightly over-regulated maybe, or badly regulated maybe. But I think in general, like I said, a lot of the bad repute that's come to the industry will start getting repaired and is getting repaired in the next few years. Having said that, there will always be a few bad apple in the basket. But overall, I don't see any reason to kind of believe that developers as a industry are bad paymasters or anything of that sort, very honestly. I think it came with a lot of other of the bits of reputation, which I kind of spoke about, and it will kind of get corrected as we move ahead, hopefully.
That's the point.
If I can add, I think amongst the startups that we use, you can classify them as B2B or B2C or whatever. But there are some that kind of masquerade. They're actually B2C, but currently they're B2B.
Yeah.
I think WeGot is one of them, and in that sense, like we as a developer, we're kind of a proxy for what the customer wants. Any developer worth her sauce will basically know what the customer wants today. And one of the big trends that are going on today is sustainability. I want to know my water consumption. How are you going to give me electric vehicle charging? All of these things, like these are trends that are going on that we somehow need to cater for, because we're building these communities where people live. And, unfortunately, like when you see the government involvement in kind of thought leadership on this front, or maybe setting policy in place, that kind of lags a little bit. So people want to hold someone accountable when they are buying into a community. It tends to happen with the developer themselves. So developers who want to be able to offer something extra to the customer will actually look at these kind of avenues. So when we started looking at WeGot to put water meters into all our projects, it's very clear that the initial CapEx investment will happen from the developer side of things, but the ongoing OpEx, maintenance of these water meters, etc., that does have to come from the customer standpoint.
Right.
Some of these companies are masquerading as B2B, but it's really just an entry point where they can get in and get that kind of scale. If WeGot went door to door in like single family homes and tried to get, hey, can I put water meters? That's not going to happen. Whereas today I'll say, yeah, come into my township where I'm selling 4,000 units and we'll be doing water meters for every single unit. So, I feel like investors, I'm sure, they maybe need to be more attuned to this aspect of it. Because that's that's how change is going to be driven. Like when you look at integrated townships or larger communities, those are actually way more sustainable than, standalone homes, right? How are you going to recycle your water? Do you have space on your roof to put solar panels or anything like that? So as our cities urbanize and as it tends to become more in terms of, high density living, I think this is where a lot of future policies will also be driven. And that's how such things are not just, policies or thoughts or anything like that, but it's actually how the rubber meets the road and like how you're actually going to execute that. So these startups, I think, will benefit when they come through the developer side of things, and therefore the investment should also benefit.
And Pavitra, to that point, I think what you're also saying is that there are business model innovations that you have to look at in terms of the costing, in terms of the CapEx versus OpEx, what you can do from a SaaS point of view and so on, so that you're not front loading the cost for a developer to pay you when the real value is being derived by the people who are going to live there. A related question on, again, the venture investor part, right? It sort of came to me on the chat is, what would it take for mainstream large VCs to embrace PropTech? Your thoughts? It still is not mainstream from our vantage point, right? What are your thoughts, Apoorv, Abhishek?
Maybe I can go first. So I think there needs to be a story, a good case study. Once there is that case study and people know that these are scalable businesses, and there is money to be made. I'm sure, see, I think developers not paying on time or not being good paymasters is an excuse, because most of the startups who are working, most of them work with much larger developers, and they typically don't have any major cash flow challenges. I mean, the amount of money you need to give to that startup is going to be very less compared to anything else, right? So I don't think, so that's an excuse. The bigger problem I think the VCs are looking at is that there has not been a great case study. I think Infra Markets is one where we can say that there is now one unicorn in India coming from the real estate infra space. But if we can have a couple of more such exits where people have actually made money by investing in PropTech startups, that will give a huge fillip to this. The other thing I feel is a lot of these startups are currently, so, B2B startups or the SaaS model startups have, some of them are now looking to go beyond India, and the kind of revenue model or the revenues that they can make in other countries, in the developed countries, is much higher for the same service that they would give in India. So if some of them can actually crack the US market or the European market, and I know that some of them are looking to do that, that will give a much bigger boost to their valuations, and hence probably outside investors trying to get a pie of their growth, and hence giving exits to some of those angel investors. And that is how this entire ecosystem keeps flowing up, right? The bigger investor gives exit to the smaller investor gets that money, gets more confidence, and wants to put that money in a thing that he's got confidence and already done that well. So that circle will start kind of
gaining more momentum, I guess. Yeah.
Yes. And that's how it will drive. I think it is maybe just a year or so, and we'll see that tick happening in PropTech startups as well.
You heard it first here. All right, Apurv, what about you? What do you think?
So, Apurv, to begin with, I will kind of to say that a PropTech is a very wide term. We are talking about SaaS companies which are providing project management software, to companies like WeGot which are providing hardware, to a student living or a co-living company which is kind of a service layer on top of property. So there is a very wide variety that we are kind of clubbing into PropTech. And within that, say, for example, if I were to give a few examples, one of our own investee companies or ex-investee companies called Design Cafe, or a Live Space, or that entire, that kind of segment is a space which is kind of has, both venture capital as well as private equity. I'm not talking about a startup. I'm talking about, that entire category of home improvement, home interior startup. And a lot of the, pieces, for example, co-living, student living, shared offices, flexi offices. I think because of the linear nature of those businesses, will probably skip VC and go to PE straight away. Because
funding,
because the nature of the beast is very different. It's not an exponential play, but there is a lot of value addition available. So we are seeing with some of our investee companies in these spaces that it's definitely not a VC play, but it is a PE play, and we're seeing participation kind of come in. So I think to paint that with one brush and evaluate is not something which is a fair thing, because the different segments work very differently. For example, a B2B SaaS company, in my opinion, with say Rohan, Abhishek and me, I think are co-investors in a company called Falcon Brick, which does project management software. For example, a company like that, I feel, the market sizing may never be large enough for an IPO, unless the requirement in those cases is to go global, to kind of look beyond India. If you're a B2B SaaS company, there's only going to be a few hundred developers that you're going to be able to work with in the country. So each segment behaves differently. Somewhere, VC money is already there. In some segments, I don't think VC will ever come in. You will see private equity to kind of consolidate and build scale in student housing, co-living, some of these sectors. So its money is already there in some sectors, and some of it will behave slightly differently from.
But it also opens up an opportunity, right? Some of these companies which are solving it can actually go to the broader, not just in India, sort of go look at the market, because if you solve for India, you can solve for a lot of other, developing nations, Southeast Asian nations, Africa, so on and so forth. I believe that that's also the other opportunity piece, I guess, if I was to take that out from there. Interesting. Let me, we are at 3:40. I want to make sure that I also, bring up some of the questions that have come up. I've got a list of them, and I can continue to converse with you guys for the next hour. But so there are two questions. I'm going to club them together by Arjun. Is fractional investment the new wave in PropTech? How is one platform different from the other? Is it all opportunity driven? And how do you sort of differentiate? And I think if I were to generalize that, right, from a trends point of view, right, you keep seeing this happening, right? That you've got now fractional investing because there's a company that has raised a good amount of money, and you see 3 of them coming, in the last 6 months, sort of doing this. What are your thoughts? I mean, specifically to Arjun's question about fractional investing, if any of you have thoughts on that, and maybe general, trends. How do you spot trends in PropTech from an investment point of view? Okay.
And venture. Yeah. I've not studied fractional investment so well, so I'm not the right person to answer, because someone has to answer. So,
I can answer it.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
I think there's a huge scope for fractional investment, but it's about the platform again and what opportunities are there in the platform, because everybody's looking for a yield. So if you have a property with a good yield and that platform has it, then why not? Because why not open the door to somebody who can invest 20 lakhs or 25 lakhs in a yielding product, getting some 6-7% return? I think there's a huge market for that, and anybody would want a piece of real estate, right? So I think there's a huge scope for fractional investment. There are a few platforms there right now, but I think the ability to get those good deals on the platform is that's key. So Pavitra opens up a portfolio to some people, it'll be really good.
But a piece of caution would be the regulatory part, Zayed, if I may add. There is a regulatory part from investment.
I think Apurv is the CA over here, so he'll be able to answer that better, because I think everybody's investing in the company level, right? So it's like an unstructured REIT kind of. But it's a different. It's over here you're investing in a particular asset or group of assets that's a larger pool of assets, and it's slightly different. But yeah, I think it would do really well if you have a good platform, good governance, and all these key things matter. I had one more question which I wanted to answer, because I really want to know who that person was. There was a person called Pothole Raja.
Yeah, that was Saurabh from Pothole Raja.
Okay.
Yeah, and he deleted his question. I don't know why. But
I said I'll answer it live. So I think something happened with Zoom. Anyways, I took a picture of it because I like the
there it is. I have it in front of me if you want it.
Yeah, even I have it over here. So Saurabh's question for everybody is, we have come up with a new technology of making roads from 100% plastic waste. It will help reduce the cost of construction by minimum 20% and increase the life of roads and pavements. How open are the real estate companies? Open to giving opportunity to do a paid pilot to startups like us? We're really happy to do it. In fact, we're doing a very large township project in Sarjapur, which is about 160 acres. It's called the Prestige City. And we are kind of encouraging ideas like this. So we're doing a plotted aspect over there called Great Acres. And the roads we've asked our engineering teams to incorporate the use of plastic. So if there are startups and different companies like this, please reach out to developers. We're very eager to incorporate ideas like this. I think we last heard of this when Bangalore International Airport decided to do their roads, where they told the public to start donating all plastic because they want to create the roads through plastic. I really don't know how ecologically sustainable this is though, because isn't plastic not biodegradable? So that's my question to Pothole Raja. But happy to work with startups like this who want to do a pilot. I think demonstrating use case is essential. And this is where, developers come in, because we can give you that kind of canvas to do that. I hope I answered your question.
Just to add to that, if Portal Raja, if you do get a pilot with Prestige and Brigade,
I knew where you're coming from.
Then come to me also, because we would like to invest. But that's
Mauke Pe Chauka. I love that about you, Abhishek. Great.
No, actually, I'll tell you, two, three companies that we have invested in, and I can name, like, one of them was Falcon Brick, then Home Capital and all. It was me who went and told them, please mera paisa lo, because they didn't want the money that the time at which I went and pitched to them. So Home Capital was a funny story. They had already raised from VCAT and they closed the round. They came to us to say that we have this product. I said, product to hum dekh lenge, but please take my money. He said, no, my round is closed. 2 months back, he called me. He said, one investor was supposed to put in that money. He's backing out. So we have a small amount of kind of play where you can put in a small amount. Would you be interested? I'm like, yeah. And then each and every round they've raised money, we've got. So we like companies where we have to run behind the founders rather than the others.
Such a good conversation. One is giving business, the other is saying, take my money. I mean, I think this is utopia. Right?
Abhishek just reminded me, Falcon Brick, all these are good stories, because initially when we saw them a few years ago, the product offering was different and things like that. And it's completely evolved. Their mission statement was, to deliver a good app where you can track the progress and do project monitoring and things like that on the ground. The biggest kind of hesitancy came from the project team, saying that, listen, this is going to take up. Firstly, sir, you've implemented SAP on our company. That guy has to sit on site and do that work. Does he sit on site and enter all that information? Or do we have to hire another person to enter that information? Or does he go to site and actually see if the work's happening or not? That's number one. So we have to deal with all of this stuff. But then eventually what happened was we did implement Falcon Brick, because I got a call from Aditya Virvani maybe a year ago or something, saying that, listen, buddy, Falcon Brick again is trying to approach us to work with you. We have been working with them, and the product is different now. So then now Falcon Brick is being adopted by us at certain projects. And, that convinced the teams, saying that, listen, boss, if they can do it, what is your issue? Like, you better well do it. And it's a good solution that they provided. So kudos to their team. And I hope this answers your question. If some of the contemporaries in the industry are using it, it's more impetus for us to use it, because use case has been demonstrated. To the teams. For the promoter, it's fine. If there's a use case, I'll ask my team to use it. But at the end of the day, they have to adopt it. They have to use it. They can't just get it for namesake, right? It doesn't serve any purpose. It has to be a win-win for them. And more feedback that they get from us, the better they can develop their product.
Okay. Before I move to the next question from Tarun, but before I move to that, there is a message from Abhishek Chajed. He's from RecycleX. He said, we also have products made out of plastic waste, that is pavers and bricks, and would be happy to. So Zayed, it's going to come to you now, for sure. And others as well. But
what I suggested is Brigade Reap should kind of circulate it to all developers every month or periodically. So at least we know that it's verified by Reap. We're not just getting some random requests.
I just want to make sure that I have not requested any of them to plug in for Reap, but thank you so much. I just want to make sure that the attendees don't feel that this is an event wherein I have pushed you guys. But thank you so much. I think it means a lot to us for sure.
Does that mean, Apul, that the hamper which you promised us for promoting Reap will no longer?
So that's coming. That's still coming, though. That's still coming. Okay. Another question is from Tarun at Lightstore. He says, regarding commercialized/retail real estate, is it fair to say that it remains largely unorganized? How can startups try and make inroads into this type of non-residential real estate sector, non-residential real estate? So, what Lightstore is trying to do is essentially, the concept of flexi retail or co-retail, sort of, have a big store which can then be, used by multiple not just a single brand is there, and not for that 3 years or 5 years, but sort of have it for smaller durations. Your thoughts on that, to his question? How can startups try and make inroads into that space?
I mean, in some ways, I feel like commercial and retail is a lot more organized than residential.
Okay.
But of course, it kind of depends who the audience is. It is a lot more institutionalized. So I guess we're talking about a different kind of product there. If someone is trying to go to Main Street retail, like if I can use a Bangalore analogy, if they are trying to get the experience like on Commercial Street or Brigade Road, yeah, it's going to be very fragmented. But if you go to a store in a mall or somewhere that is more curated, that's a lot easier because you're just dealing with one landlord who, the owner in the end needs to have that kind of vision, right? For the property, better rentals, all of that. So I guess it really depends if they're looking at a very different experience, like a high street experience rather than a more institutional kind of mall experience.
But so what I hear is there's definitely a scope. I think it has to be there has to be good contours around it in terms of where what kind of retail stores do you approach to, which kind of brands do you get in, so on and so forth. Would that be okay? There is one question from Anjan. How do developers see automation in sales and marketing? Will we see more tech replacing human interferences on sales side? Pavitra, I know you could be, but I also, okay. Yeah, Abhishek, I think you sort of jumped on it. So go ahead and then.
Yeah, this is something which is very close to my heart. And so I personally, so there is a lot of people who are talking about online selling real estate, right? I personally think that will not happen because real estate is being able to and all of that, right? However, the entire journey today, you can completely automate. When a customer is looking for a house, he's online. He leaves a lead on one of your Google ads or a Facebook ad. It goes to your landing page. Your landing page, you can have enough information for him to get excited about it, and then kind of get a call from a telecaller. These days, that even telecaller call, you can go. You need not do that. There are these WhatsApp bots where you have the best possible collateral explanation of your project, your sales person talking about the project, videos and all, and it's all automated. You get everything on the WhatsApp bot. The WhatsApp bot then goes to your booking engine. If someone likes what they see, they can immediately see what the live inventory is. They can see facing. They can see the views from that. You can add all of that into your system.
Right.
The engine is done. The only thing that you need to go to the developer's office is to sign the agreement because registration is still not online for immovable property. You do that and then you go to your, let's say, a customer portal, right? And then customer portal, you get all your demand letters. You see what the construction progress is. You know how much amount I've paid, what is going to come, when it is going to come, when am I going to get possession. I can book my possession appointment on that portal itself. Once that phase is done, I take possession, and then there are maintenance issues. Again, you have your things like apartment data, MyGate. All these guys are anyway giving the services post your possession. So all of this can be completely streamlined, make like some of the best customer experience you can give by having all these systems in place. So although I wouldn't say that selling can be done online completely, everything else other than selling in the entire customer experience journey can be done completely online without any human intervention by giving a much better experience than what you're giving today.
Pavitra, what about you? Want to add?
Yeah, I think, because I look at a lot of our internal processes, right? And how are we going to, realign those processes and just sort of eliminate what is not required today, or which parts of those really need to be done by human beings and which parts really can just be done by a machine or software or whatever. See, in the end, this is the biggest purchase somebody is making in their life. They do want to speak to someone personally at the time of maybe closing the deal, and of course during various points in the the duration or the relationship life cycle. We see lots of opportunity to sort of take the repetitive sort of tasks, try to automate those as much as possible. And what we're trying to do is maybe like keep on a CRM team front. Like, why do they have to spend 85% of their time, doing invoices and releasing demand notes and doing allotment letters and calling the courier and finding whether the agreement has reached the customer or not? Those are the pieces that we see as the pain points. And again, it's really, how do you convince the teams themselves that this is of value to them? A lot of people hate making these changes because it's very scary. They're like, what do you mean? You're going to automate half my job? Then what am I supposed to do here? It's sort of educating them that they can actually spend that time on talking to the customer. And that's when you know whether you have a good CRM team or not. Is that the team you want to put in front of the customer? So, we want to automate as much as possible, but there's a lot of it that we want to keep with human interaction and front facing with the customer. And there's a lot of opportunity for that. It just takes a lot of effort from whoever's trying to drive that change, because you have to really get into the nitty-gritty and see how are all these different solutions tying in with each other, which I find the most challenging, is to actually have this bigger vision as to how you want that whole journey to work and which are the different pieces that you want to integrate in. If you don't have that picture, you're just going to be swayed by every single technology solution that comes around, pitching you the business and say, and typically what they'll do is say, Prestige is using me, Shobha is using me, why isn't Brigade using me, and then that the whole team comes under fire. They're like, oh, we better start using them before we get blasted for not using the same technology or whatever. So I think we have to be very crystal clear. What is our process? Where are the points that we actually need to bring in that automation? And is someone meeting that need? So yeah, that's kind of my pitch on automating. At least I feel 85% of it.
Very interesting. Thanks, Pavitra. There's a very interesting question for each of the panelists. What critical business problems are your own operations team or boardroom discussions? Are your own operations teams sort of discussing and bringing to your attention? That has not been solved. AKA white spaces. What are the white spaces that your teams are identifying for you? Would you care to elaborate? I think it's a very interesting question. That's from Sridhar at Billion Card. Okay.
Need to think about that a little more.
All right. While you guys think about it, I think that would be a question. I think one question that just came up was, hi, Neha from LiveSafe. 5G is going to be out very soon. Do you have any plans for managing communication access in your offices? I think this is a problem which is, there's a lot of electromagnetic radiation around us. Neha and the team at LiveSafe is trying to sort of give us a bubble which is, safe for the EMR. So his question is, what are your plans for managing communication access in your offices? Joydeep, any specific thoughts on that?
Honestly, I met Neha, I think a few months back along with you. And
yes, I remember that.
Solution. But see, with respect to, based on what he pitched that day, I'm answering based on that. He said, there's a lot of radiation and so and so, and you have to kind of implement his solutions to reduce that radiation. But see, frankly, that we need to know how much of it is, we need some more data on that, whether it really affects the inhabitants in the apartments. So no plans as of now. We need some data to come out, some official data to come out, and then we can act upon it.
Okay. So I think we've got a couple of more questions, but maybe, let me just reiterate the last one. Any critical business problems, white spaces that you and your teams are identifying? I think this is from startups trying to understand, which are the areas that they should sort of continue to work, what are investable. Apurv?
Yeah, so Apul, one of the things which I think has been, the bane of our industry is the general lack of data in terms of what is being built, what is selling better, what is, just the general lack of transparency of data, even as developers in terms of, industry reports on, of the same vintage will give you two entirely different pictures. And, what has happened now over the last few years is with digitization of, registry records, both of, sale of land as well as lease of commercial properties, as well as RERA, I think a whole lot of data is now available. And, I remember talking to CRE Matrix. I don't know if it's a Brigade Reap
it is. So you probably spoke to Abhishek Kiran Gupta.
Right. So, and they were kind of bringing out some interesting insights on that front, things like kind of, can I evaluate if, what size of 2-bedroom is selling better in a particular area, is the, which side of the road is selling better, which are the leases in the vicinity which are expiring in the near future. So, should I go pitch them? So I think data in general, not just from a, CRM perspective, but, from a planning perspective, from, an industry intelligence perspective, I think is a space which is, fairly open. And I think it's something which is going to become fairly significant in the next few years, because we're just coming from a place where, data is just absolutely unorganized. Like I said, reports of the same vintage from 2 different leading consultants will give you an entirely different picture.
So the data organization, the sanctity of data, driving knowledge and insights out of data, bringing the function aspects out of it. A lot of that, I think you're saying is there's scope in each of those areas.
Right, okay. Because we're seeing a lot of data being used on the sales side as far as CRM, etc. is concerned. But, planning, industry intelligence, all of that is a little bit of a missing piece in terms of data. It's just happening, offline.
Okay.
Just to add to that, if you look at the entire spectrum of real estate, and if a developer wants to stand out, right? Every developer has something, some DNA, some USP, and that's how he tries to sell the product compared to any other product in the market. So one is, firstly, how do you purchase land? Secondly, how do you design a product on that land? Then how do you construct that, and how do you sell that? So on the first 2 aspects of the entire supply chain, purchasing land and even some amount of design, I don't think there are a lot of possibilities of startups, but if someone comes and makes some breakthrough or some solution, I think that's a great thing. A lot of work can happen on the delivery, which is how do you improve your quality. Quality is the biggest pain point in our industry, right? Customers don't, the expectations of customers from real estate developers is so low that if you even do hygiene things, you will be looked at as, a brand that cares for the customer. Your trust will be very high. And why does that, and how can you solve that problem, right? So the actual construction management process, if there are ways to improve your quality, if there are ways to ensure that you give your product on time, and with the specific use of startups in this, obviously offline you can do everything, but if there are startup interventions which can assist doing this better, it will help. The second pain point is sales. If there are ways in which what we have been discussing, sales, CRM, post-sales, the entire customer experience, if you can make that much better, much more seamless. Customer experience has changed in so many industries except real estate. We only talk about AR, VR, which is, I'd say, sometimes it's like a hurdle in the sales process. I'm trying to say something, and then we are trying to show something, and it just sometimes
doesn't connect very well.
Is not great.
Yeah.
So, but there are so many other improvements that can be done in this entire customer experience journey. So I think these are 2 areas where a big change can happen in our industry.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Apple, actually, both the things that Apurva and Abhishek spoke about are, in a sense, that off-site related, right? There's some on-site related also, if I can explain regarding that. Some of them are, and all our sites, we have a huge construction debris waste problem. If somebody can, kind of solve that problem, that would be great. Then we have a huge water problem during construction. Some solutions where we can recycle that water and reuse that within the site. Nice. So recycling of some materials within the site during construction.
Right.
These would also help, apart from.
Very interesting. I know we are just a tad bit over 4. So I want to keep it at, the questions still keep coming. There's questions on energy efficiency, washroom management, a referral. So what I'll do is I'll try and probably even send some of these to you, and then we can when we publish this video, we can probably answer some of them from what you guys come back to us with. Very quickly, when REAP started again, the idea was, the leadership team was clear that REAP should mentor startups for the industry. And I think all of you, the fact that you guys have used REAP startups, have invested in REAP startups, sort of validates that. The next thing that we are also doing now is sort of also, we've announced a syndicate fund for prop tech startups, early to mid-stage startups. Again, the idea there is to bring in people of your stature and others who are looking at investing in this sector, sort of come together with us and invest in interesting startups. So, would definitely request, of course, each of you to be, to collaborate with us as we look at interesting startups to invest in. And also for participants, those of you who are from the fraternity or are looking to sort of invest in real estate startups, come chat with us, drop us a line at investments@brigadereap.com or reach out to any of us at REAP. With that, I want to be cognizant of time. Once again, I want to thank each and every one of you. I think you've taken time out from your busy schedules. Some of you I had to sort of pester to get you, but thank you so much. Thanks for being here. Thanks for answering the questions. The questions still keep coming, and continue to guide our startups. Not just invest in them, and let's make PropTech a sector to reckon with in the coming years. So thanks once again, everybody. Really appreciate that, your time.
Thank you, Apul. Thanks, Apurva. The rest of the panelists, really appreciate being here. Some great insight was shared. Happy to have contributed.
Yeah, any last thoughts? I mean, if you guys have, I think feel free to. I think we can take maybe another minute.
As Kapil Sharma says, I started investing in startups so that Apul could invite me one day on Brigade REAP.
How do you feel now? Thanks, Abhishek. You're being modest, but
no, exciting, good discussions. Great to be on the same panel as all these awesome guys. So,
yeah,
really nice.
It was an absolute pleasure and honor to be on this panel with all of you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Apur.
Thanks all. Really nice having this conversation. And yeah, I'm glad that it went off so well. Thanks again, Apul.
Sure. Thanks, Savita. Thanks for being here.
Apul. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.